All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time once again for BIAKelsey Live on our very mediocre opening sound, which we just rip off from Spreaker. Welcome to the week of December 1st, 2016. Who would have believed that we were that far along already? We're going to have a very interesting show, a little change from the ordinary pace, as we have two interviews today. One with Elise Neal, head of MapQuest for Business with MapQuest, the Verizon-owned location services provider, and with Lori Fonts, head of marketing at Goodser, a pay-per-call vendor here in the local media market. Also, we'll be covering a couple of news stories, talking about the announcement by AWS of their new AI support and low-end services or server offerings, and some questions about the future of beacons in marketing. So first off, hey, Mike, welcome to the show once again. My co-host, Mike Boland.
Hi, Mitch.
What's up this week with you?
The normal flow of covering the market. Lots happening as always. And of course, we have our conference next week, so gearing up for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be in Boston at BIAKelsey next Monday through Wednesday. So if you're in the Northeast and want to come by, please do take a look at the site. It's at BIAKelsey.com. So first off, let's talk about AWS and what they announced this week. And twofold. One is during their reInvent conference, they brought their AI offerings up to parity, basically, with Microsoft and Google and several other organizations that have rolled out APIs for a variety of cognitive services like IBM. Amazon announced several things. One is Amazon Recognition, which looks at images and interprets them and returns an answer. For instance, that's a pencil for a picture of a pencil. And that kind of deep learning is very useful, particularly in retail settings and other settings where you're trying to help people identify next steps. So, for instance, you could use that kind of camera capability when showing a broken pipe in a house, too. That would be something that could be forwarded as an urgent request rather than a less urgent one. And maybe I'm speculating too much there. Then Amazon Polly, which is essentially text-to-speech, with the same capability on the back end as used in Alexa, which formulates normal spoken language responses to questions and queries. And finally, Amazon Lex, which is the core of Alexa, a natural language understanding and automatic speech recognition platform. And so, with that announcement, and I think this is important to future marketing generally, we are now seeing not only all the major hosting providers providing cognitive services and some new competitors bringing cognitive services in as augmentation to enterprise and other applications, we're going to start to see real price competition amongst these companies in terms of the cost of AI for marketers. One of the things we'll be talking about next week at Next, in fact, both with Catherine Hayes of the Wharton School and with a couple of people from IBM Watson, is how AI and machine learning are already starting to impact their clients' marketing decisions. Now, Mike, we've talked a lot about the use of AI and particularly machine learning to better target and understand the needs of customers over the past few weeks. This Amazon announcement, just given their breadth and their presence in the market, how big a move is this for Amazon? Is this an existential investment, or are they at this point just playing catch up?
Well, I think it's an evolutionary move. I mean, it's not revolutionary, but it's still, I think, a move in the right direction. I think it democratizes a lot of the capability that, as you said, has been resident in things like Alexa, brings it to a broader marketplace. And I think eventually that will find its way down market to either SMBs or those that serve SMBs in terms of offerings for things like whether it's computer vision, like the busted pipe example that you gave, and being able to kind of tell that's a pipe, or something that is probably a little bit nearer term, which is voice search, and bringing that kind of Alexa voice search plus machine learning. There's a lot of technologies that go into that, of course, and bring that to kind of to more small businesses and local search eventually. So I think it's a down market long tail play of what they've already had.
Yeah, and so again, the competition and the pricing of this stuff is going to go through the floor. I think the most interesting thing for marketers today to try out with Alexa or with any of the other providers, Azure has this, so does IBM, and so does Google, is the bot creators. You can begin offering a bot experience, which would be a trained set of responses to typical customer questions or potential lead questions and so forth. And these chatbots are essentially like stage managers. They keep your attention as they change the offering that's going to be presented to you in the background. Yeah. They capture some information and then they customize and personalize in response to you. So that, for marketers, I think is the thing to look at and really dig deeply into in that announcement. But AWS made another announcement, which I think is even more important and will shake a lot of what we have traditionally covered as IYP and web hosting services companies, and that is they announced Amazon Light Sail. And in a nutshell, a Light Sail server is a virtual private computer that needs no configuration. You want a WordPress application, you turn on WordPress and you start working in WordPress with this stuff at really low prices. So going from a time where a small instance of a server on a Wix or a GoDaddy or otherwise is $5 a month. That's where the Light Sail offering starts and goes up from $5 to $10 to $20 to $40 based on the amount of storage and the both in terms of RAM and storage capacity. But these prices are very competitive vis-a-vis those web hosting services providers. So they're going down market. How do you see Amazon competing to enable small business and perhaps even tying some of these services that we're seeing them announce today into a broader small business infrastructure over the course of the next few years?
Well, I think, of course, hosting is something that is really the kind of first step to onboard small businesses to an online presence. Even though a lot of them are leapfrogging that and going straight to Facebook pages, as we might talk about in a little bit. But I think that, this is Amazon's, reaching further horizontally into the kind of the suite of offerings, which is interesting because Amazon has long been seen as an enemy to small businesses, and I think it's long been trying to
exactly.
Do a better job in really cracking that market. And again, like I said earlier, this is just a continuation of the kind of AWS playbook by making these things more democratized, making this capability more democratized. And as you said, that will have some pricing pressure in bringing that down, which is another key aspect of reaching the small business marketplace,
right,
which is price sensitivity. So for lots of reasons, I see this as an SMB play for them.
Well, and the other thing is, from their perspective, they're now going to be able to farm their clientele, look for small businesses, and develop services that maybe tie into their logistics offerings or into other services, AI, as we were just talking about, for SMBs. So I see this as another one of the important incremental steps in bringing those services down to the SMBs. And on the other hand, I see this for IYPs, hosting companies, and so forth, as a real call to action to start to differentiate their services, not just to go low in price. I think the cheapest monthly service for a similar type of function like WordPress on AWS on GoDaddy is about $3.95 a month. So they've got $1.05 to play with in terms of their low-end price versus where AWS is coming in today. Yeah. That's a real challenge, and it's something that they're going to need to be aware of and keep an eye out on. Great. So now the next thing we are turning to is a news piece came out yesterday from Euclid Analytics, which is a retail analytics and solutions company, similar to BIAKelsey, but with a different focus. Now, they said, specifically their CEO, Brent Franson, said that beacons are dead. Now, he makes a number of arguments about why that is the case. First, he points to what appears to be relatively low spending on the technology, but particularly the fact that there's no standard for these beacons, that you essentially end up buying platforms that shut out part of any customer category, customer group that you have, depending on what kind of phone they have, whether they have the right app installed, and so forth. Right now, beacons are very siloed, and that's a valid point. But one of the things that we found in our most recent local commerce monitor survey, which we just completed this last month, was that spending on IoT, specifically beacons, that is the term we use to clarify what IoT meant in the surveys, returned some pretty interesting numbers. For our core spenders, those are SMBs that spend less than $25,000 on marketing annually. And actually, as an average, they spend about $5,500 a year on marketing. Put $57 into IoT last year. But our plus spenders, companies that, and $57 is about 1% of the core spenders' overall spend. But our plus spenders who spend more than $25,000 and their annual average is $83,000 and change on marketing spend, put $3,088 into IoT and beacons in the last year. That's about 3% of their marketing budget, which is an indication that they really are potentially adopting this technology and experimenting their way towards the kinds of experiences that customers are going to respond to. You've been tracking this market for a long time. How do you think beacons are doing, Mike?
Well, so the Euclid CEO said they're dead. I've been saying for about 2 years they never even got here. I've actually used a similar term, which is dead on arrival. And the reason is kind of the discrepancy that you mentioned, where on one side you have someone saying they're dead, on the other side our data indicate that SMBs are showing at least an aspirational interest. And I think that discrepancy is a classic disconnect when it comes to beacons, where one side of the equation is excited about them, the other is not. And the excited side are businesses that see beacons as an opportunity to engage in-store shoppers. And again, that's very aspirational. The other side of the equation are consumers whose needs have not been met by beacons. And that's because retailers so far have mostly just gone about it all wrong. There are exceptions, but they've mostly viewed beacons as a way to push promotions, and surprise, consumers don't like being blasted with ads. So if beacons are to get that all important kind of consumer opt-in, retailers need to really use them more as kind of a shopper-friendly utility for things like, finding products or in-store mapping or researching product information, checking inventory. And when beacons are actually used for promotions and just blasting ads, they shouldn't be used in the way they have been used, which is simply to, blast someone with diaper ads because they happen to be standing near the diaper aisle. And that's the classic, rhetoric that the industry keeps talking about as the opportunity, but it's really not. There should be kind of a smarter and long game played where beacons are more a retargeting tool, not a targeting tool. And what I mean by that is they measure consumers' overall spatial behavior and then send smarter and more targeted messaging that's directed at the kind of overall behavioral profiles, not just what aisle they're standing in. And then lastly, making matters even worse for consumer adoption is that there are all of these hoops they have to jump through to be compatible with a given beacon network. And as you pointed out, they're very siloed. So you need to turn on Bluetooth, you need to download a specific compatible app such as maybe the retailer's own app, and then lastly, enable push notifications on your phone. So because of all those requirements and they all have to line up, that's why beacons have been dead on arrival. And there are a few things happening that are alleviating that, which I'll say this and then close, which is one is Google's Eddystone standard, which is a broadcast standard that's just good old URLs, meaning that any phone that has a browser is compatible with a nearby beacon. And of course, Google is incentivized to keep things in the browser. But anyway, that eliminates the need for one of those requirements I mentioned, which is downloading a specific third-party app. And it brings the whole thing back to the browser, which eliminates a lot of user friction. And then the second thing I'll mention briefly is that one of the companies we're actually featuring at the conference next week is Unicast. We're having Chris Cunningham. Unicast essentially does something interesting, and it fights that silo problem that you talked about. Now, all these beacon networks are siloed and not talking to each other. They're essentially a layer that federates all of those different networks, which not only helps in some of those compatibility issues on the consumer end, but also on the merchant and the advertiser end. It's just it's a bigger sample size to be able to kind of draw conclusions because you have data from across all of those beacon networks, and it gets rid of all that kind of fragmentation and the silo problem you mentioned.
So what I would now the question, they are not arrived yet, I think, is perhaps what I would say in terms of they're not necessarily necessarily dead, but they also have not arrived as a mainstream
Well, the tech
investment.
press would have you believe they're the second coming for like the last 2 years. The amount of articles and the amount of ink that's been spilled over beacons, they would have you believe that they've arrived. But go on.
Well, but I think that the problem is that, and you hit on it, is that the use of the beacons is just simply wrong in the
Yeah.
retail environment. And Google's mobile moment is the guidepost that we need to think about here.
Yeah.
The fact that 70+% of people, when they are at the moment of purchase, are also consulting their phone now. So services, thinking in terms of serving that moment. I need more information. I'd like to make a comparison. I would like to find out what other people say. Those are the kinds of things that a beacon might be advertising to get you to dig deeper into the product you're standing in front of.
Yeah.
But again, that's retargeting. You also may want to be able
Exactly
to move them to another product. But the fact is, right now we're using it for interruptive advertising.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And
And that's the
that
wrong.
stops people in their tracks.
That's not a
So-
way to get people to opt in for anything. It's providing utility and value exchange and all that to get them to opt in, and then down the road use it for some retargeting and smart stuff. But just people just gotten greedy and like thought this is the way to just blast people with ads. And last thing I'll say is that as a quick kind of plug, we mentioned the conference next week. Another thing we have upcoming is our 2017 predictions, which is what we do every year. A lot of this stuff is exactly what I said in our 2016 predictions about a year ago,
Right.
with how all these beacons will play out, and they're just not going to get any traction unless they're seen as more of a consumer utility.
Well, we see that they're spending on them, whether or not people are using them correctly, and I think that's one of the things we'll be talking about more in the future. And that's certainly the question: is the value for the consumer, not the value for the advertiser necessarily. If you're going to think about the engagement correctly, so that's the week's news review. I want to toss it over to you, Mike, and let's talk to Goodzer.
Yeah, so our guest this week is Lori Fonts, who's head of marketing at Goodzer. Goodzer is actually a company we've been talking to for years and has had a number of kind of evolutionary pivots during that time, one of which is kind of represented in an announcement they made recently to bring pay-per-call into the fold. And they recently made this announcement. Pay-per-call, of course, is something that we've been talking about and writing about a great deal. We put out a paper on the overall area, which we call call commerce, which includes pay-per-call, a few months ago, and it's continued.
It's a free download, too.
Yep, that's a free download. You can go to the BIAKelsey website to see that. But that continues to be an area of evolution represented by this move by Goodzer. So first, I will say welcome to you, Lori. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to start off, for those unfamiliar about Goodzer, give us a quick kind of description of the company, and then also briefly kind of your role.
Sure. So Goodzer, our ultimate goal at Goodzer is to really make local marketing simple for local businesses. Make it something that is really profitable to them. And we do that through technology and our automation. We use AI. So we're essentially a technology company, but we're playing in the local space and trying to use that technology to make the marketing very simple for these businesses.
Interesting.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I thought you were done, but please finish your thought, and then we'll go into some questions.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say my role here is I'm head of marketing, so I head up the marketing of our company and this new product.
Excellent. So let's drill down a bit on the announcement that I alluded to. Goodzer has integrated pay-per-call. Tell us about the announcement, kind of at a high level, and then we'll drill down into specifics.
Sure. So at a high level, we're essentially offering a pay-per-call product for local businesses. Now, we set ourselves apart because of the technology that we have, which is proprietary. We built it ourselves. We've based other products on it, as you've kind of mentioned in our evolution. And the calls that we send are really precisely targeted. So it's for people who are actively searching for our customers' services, and then they're very likely to convert. So we're seeing really high conversion rates, and those results are what makes our customers ultimately want to keep doing business with us. So we're really serving a need in the small business marketplace.
That makes sense. And back to the kind of theme of evolutionary steps, I've covered Goodzer for a while, and at its origin, it was largely focused on product-based local categories. So in other words, lots of retail, lots of kind of local product searches and things like that. Since then, you've made a lot of moves to kind of grow into other verticals, including local services. And that's where this announcement, I think, further positions Goodzer to really kind of penetrate those markets, because as we've analyzed, a lot of service verticals kind of live or die by leads that come in via phone. So with that backdrop, what are the specific kind of types of local businesses, service-based businesses that you're specifically targeting, or that you're finding are valuing this type of capability?
Yeah, the first kind of industry sector that we've really launched into is home services. Mm-hmm. So plumbers, home contractors, electricians, roofers, HVAC, et cetera. They're really the ones who really value the phone call, probably the most. They often, sometimes they have a dispatcher, but sometimes they don't. So having just their phone ring, they don't have a lot of hours at the front of the computer to kind of manage leads. They really just want to be able to take phone calls or get voicemails, really good quality voicemails. So they seem to be the sector that we've experienced the most success with, and we've really started with. Now we are expanding, so that's part of our future, is to continue to expand and use our technology to really bring the service to other industries as well. But we really saw home services as kind of having the biggest need for these phone calls.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what exactly, to kind of drill down on the actual capability, are you providing? Because as we mentioned, they appreciate phone calls, they value phone calls. Going one step further, not just kind of sending them phone calls, but in terms of like ROI reporting, what are you telling them in terms of, measurements around conversions that happened or didn't happen? And I know that AI was mentioned in a few different places around the launch. So, what type of reporting are you offering? Is it kind of call duration or the contents of the call and keyword matching, or any other kind of call analytics, as we call it, to do that kind of lead scoring?
We actually do it for the customers. So we actually kind of grade the calls and decide, okay, this call was a valid call, what we would consider a valid call. And the way we kind of categorize those is the people who are really looking for their specific services. So they get, in the beginning, we try to make the process as simple as possible for them. So in the beginning, they tell us the specific services that they not just offer, but they actually want to promote. And then we will target people who are specifically looking for those services. And then we're sending, in terms of reporting to them, what they get is really just the duration of the call, the caller's phone number, a link to the recording of a call. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them. A lot of them just don't have the time or wherewithal to really kind of dive into the statistics and what's converting and what's not. So we use our technology to really maximize that and ultimately make sure that they're profitable. So they see, okay, I'm paying Goodzer this amount and I'm making this much. And we're always making sure that we're making a profit for them.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of which, this is new, so it's probably a bit too early to tell, but you also did a number of kind of trials. Any performance indicators that you can share in those early trials, or just since it's launched, about how the pay-per-call offering has either driven more conversions, more retention, or any other success metrics that you've seen?
In terms of our customer retention, we're definitely seeing very satisfied customers, and we have over a 90% retention rate, which is fantastic. Again, we're just starting. So we're just launched. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of customers yet, but the early indicators are that we have awesome retention rates. In terms of conversions, it really depends on the different industry. It depends on their voicemail, so what their voicemail says, as well as kind of how they handle the phone calls and how they answer. And we're starting to develop content to help them along with some of those aspects of their business as well. But we can see conversion rates as high as 75%.
Yeah, that's of course very high.
So, Lori, nobody on the air knows, but you and I both worked at Haibu, and I can remember sitting on phone calls at call centers with plumbers driving around, in particular in Baltimore and in the UK. And they really do value those calls. It's incredible what they're looking for. they're also struggling with how to manage the call volume and scheduling and so forth, because almost invariably on those calls, they were driving around during the conversation. Are you also looking at integration of this kinds of service with other tools in order to help what we call the local on-demand worker or a small business schedule, connect, and fulfill, as well as deliver on the call itself?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we have on our long-term roadmap. I mean, right now, obviously, we're very focused on making sure that we're delivering the results and we're providing the best calls in the industry. So that's our main goal right now. But we do try to work with the customers as well. We pause during certain times of day when they're at the jobs. And we try to really work with them to make sure they're able to answer the phone when we're sending the phone calls. So, but in terms of the long-term future, yeah, we definitely are looking to integrate and provide additional services that help them manage the overall call volume.
So that's great, Lori. In closing, speaking of kind of long-term roadmap and all that good stuff, what's next for either this product rollout, the pay-per-call capability, feature upgrades, or anything else that's that you can talk about in terms of Goodzer's future, or even we talked about your vertical expansion. Any other verticals where Goodzer could move with this capability, or any other new things that you're excited about?
Sure. I mean, in terms of this product, we're really excited about what 2017 will bring. We're really looking to start scaling. So now that we've gotten the product kind of figured out and we're seeing a lot of success with it, we're really looking to scale pretty tremendously into 2017, as well as expand into additional verticals. So medical professionals, other kind of professional service-based businesses are probably the next step for us. And then, of course, continuing the automation and continuing some of the things that Mitch mentioned, like what can we integrate that just makes it easier for our customers? Because ultimately, we just want to make it really easy for them. We don't want them to have to think a lot about marketing, but we want to make sure that they're profitable and we're delivering great results. Yep. So just helping them grow their businesses.
That makes sense. And appointment-based local businesses tend to be the ones that value phone calls the greatest. So that's a lot of the home services. And as you said, moving into professional services, doctors, lawyers, accountants, these are all kind of appointment-based businesses, which tends to be a proxy for the categories that tend to value phone calls. So very interesting stuff. Right. So thank you for joining us, Lori. And I think, Mitch, I'll kick it back to you to go on to the next topic.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you very much, Lori. So one of the things I wanted to point out before we move on to our last interview of the day is that we have published our SMB's Christmas wish list on blog at blog.biakelsey.com. You will see it. It's currently the top story. What do SMBs want in 2017 by our analytics team? We urge you to take a look at it. There's a nice infographic. You can print it out and put it up on your wall if you like. But it's a good story. People are looking forward to spending more money and moving upstream in terms of higher levels of service, integrating business capabilities, productivity software in the cloud, online meeting services, tap to pay at point of sale, and a variety of analytics investments. So take a look at it. We will be doing these kinds of infographics every week going forward and talking about them here on the show as well. With that, we are technically finished with the show for now, but we all encourage you to join us next week at BIAKelsey Next in Boston. We're having a very different kind of event for us. It's in a nightclub. It will be a constant networking and should be exciting event with senior managers of local media, marketing, agencies, resellers, and so forth, getting together to talk about what we're going to be buying and investing in 2017. Mike, what are you going to be talking about at the show?
Lots of stuff. And I mentioned our predictions earlier, so I think they'll get a lot of airtime. Predictions around, just to kind of first a little bit of a spoiler, one of the predictions deals with the mobile advertising revenues we expect to see in 2017. We continue to see some growth with social media as a marketing vehicle for small businesses. I'm predicting that SMB pages will go up to about 60 million. They currently stand around 50 million. In 2017, about 7 million of which will be paid, making Facebook the leading, in terms of SMB penetration, provider of SMB advertising and presence.
Yep.
And then also the growth, speaking of social, the growth of Snapchat, which is something
Yes.
that is mostly been at the brand level, but we see them making moves which triangulate some down market shifts and interest among SMBs to use it as a way to acquire, retain, and serve their customers. It's going to be interesting to see that play out. Those are a few things I'll be talking about at the conference.
Well, yeah, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation with Nish Parekh and Jody Sass. Nish is with IBM Watson, and Jody has just recently left Watson to start a company called Equals3, which has a profoundly interesting marketing automation tool built on Watson. Its name is Lucy. And we'll be learning a lot more about that and generally talking about the importance of integrating data and reporting into marketing in order to better target, better convert, and generally improve the margins of these organizations. I think AI, as I've looked at it, is probably the most profound transformation I've run into since the original internet. I've had the same sense using Watson that I had when I logged onto the well in 1987 and saw minds connecting. With augmented access to data is a really profound change in the way we're going to do business. So we're looking forward to having that conversation and much more at BIAKelsey Next starts on Monday afternoon in Boston. If you're in the Northeast, please stop by. We'd love to have you. And with that, Mike, thanks again for another weekly discussion of the marketing world.
Thanks,
we'll
Mitch.
see you in Boston.
Yep.
We'll see you in Boston. And thanks to everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good night if you're on the other side of the world. This is BIAKelsey Live.